Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the new KZ ZS12 Pro. This is the previous KZ ZS12 Pro X. I mean, this is the Pro 2. This is the Pro X. That's not confusing at all. But what actually stood out on the Pro X originally was this, right? This one was the all-metal black shell. It had some switches. But really what stood out was the kind of the matte black, all-metal shell, weighty, solid. It was a really, really cool set if you're into metal shells. When I saw the Pro 2 announced and that they replaced it with kind of the resin back, I thought, it was kind of a switch that maybe no one wanted. They kind of kept the faceplate cool and they added some accent pieces to it. But what a lot of people really liked about the ZS12 Pro X was that metal shell, and to replace it with the resin was something different. But what I will say is this one was a weighty, solid build. It doesn't quite feel like other, maybe even polished metal shells because it has this matte finish to it. It's actually a little bit weighty. This feels very much like a traditional IM that you may already have. It's got the resin back on it. It's really nice and smooth. It is much lighter in weight than the all-metal shell. But I think the nozzle is actually a little bit different as well. So I think they increased the nozzle size. If we look at it really closely, you can kind of see. So that is a change that not many people are going to appreciate. But yeah, you know, it's kind of a trade-off of you get a lighter, maybe more comfortable shell. This one had a smaller nozzle. So those tend to attract different preferences. Some people are really sensitive to nozzle size and they'll probably like the original Pro X. Some people just want a very lightweight shell in their ear, and the Pro 2 may feel more comfortable to them. But we'll slide these out of the way, and I'll say that sound wise these are not radically different. They didn't really rework the Pro 2 to be radically different than the original Pro X. So from the graph, and I didn't even graph the original, I did graph the original ZS12 Pro X. You can see it on my squig, but it's just kind of a variation on this. It's just a little bit flatter about right there, and the upper range is a little bit different. But sound-wise, these are both very upper treble boosted sets. They're not radically different in sound. They both kind of have this high emphasis in the upper treble. That didn't really change with the Pro 2. So what is this one? This one is, again, it's a single dynamic driver, 5 balanced armatures. The 5 balanced armatures we can see on one of these sides. Maybe about right there. We can see most of them kind of. So dynamic driver, superlinear dynamic driver, 5 balanced armatures. It's about $60. So again, what is it really compared to the original Pro X? It's not really far from the original, which found a home with gamers who appreciated the upper range emphasis, and is really no different with Pro 2, except it will lean more towards casual gamers because they have this 10 dB bass shelf with really no switches. So another difference was the bass shelf. So on the Pro 2, you have this 10 dB, very much a music-focused bass shelf. That's quite a lot of bass presence. For gamers, you tend to not want that much bass because it affects kind of the clarity and the imaging and all of those things. So on the original Pro X, they had switches, and you can go from a very light bass shelf up to a heavier bass shelf if you want. With the Pro 2, they just kind of gave you this very musical style bass shelf, and we'll kind of get into that. But I would say just looking at it, I would say that's not necessarily a gamer style tuning, but we'll talk about that in a second. So if I own ZS12 Pro X, would I upgrade to the Pro 2? And I would say no, it's probably a side grade. They're very similar in sound. But some will appreciate, again, as I said, the shell type is a little bit different, a little bit lighter in weight, maybe a little bit more comfortable. If you're not attracted to the original metal shell of the Pro X, then yeah, probably the Pro 2 might be more attractive to you. But I wouldn't say sound-wise, they're kind of two variations on an upper range focus, and neither of them are better than the other. They're just kind of different little flavors. And again, as I talked about, this one it's very much a gamer style set, as was the original one. So does it get the gamer exception? And I typically don't recommend sets that have a 10 dB bass shelf like that for gaming, because for those reasons I just talked about. It actually clouds too much bass clouds the imaging. It kind of clouds the clarity to it. there isn't much of a benefit to it. You need some kind of lower bass shelf. You don't need a full 10 dB. That's kind of more of a music style bass shelf. But I will kind of give it the exception in this case, but I don't really approve of what they did. And it has really great imaging for one reason, because they have a heavy boost in this whole upper range section that's quite heavy boosted. That tends to sit over the bass, that tends to cloud the imaging. They basically just boosted this side and said, well, we know this is kind of a fun style bass, but we're just going to push the whole upper range farther, and that'll make the imaging a little bit clearer. And that's exactly what it sounds like. But they really pushed the upper range into kind of crispy levels, and that's fine for sound effects and gaming, not as much for instruments. And again, you can kind of look at this one and say, what does the sound look like? It's a pretty heavy style V, but it does lean brighter later, kind of all that whole range up there. And the bass, again, this is their super linear driver, and I don't remember if the original had the super linear driver, so that may be another difference. And again, this one sounds like the super linear driver. It's a nice heavier bass curve, but it is tamed quite a bit by that whole upper range. If you're looking for a bassy style set, this is not the one, because you hear a lot of this over that, and it doesn't quite come across as a heavier bass set. It just kind of comes across as there's a nice amount of bass to balance the kind of the wicked amount of upper range that they put into it. So the upper range is pushed forward over the bass, and it does have more thump than rumble. Again, it kind of comes across kind of right in this area. It's not really a heavy rumbling set, which is fine for gaming as well. And the mids, again, more so influenced by the upper range, which are kind of just pushed forward over the bass. And it does sound like a gaming set for that reason. It has this very clean and clear style to it, but less natural with all that treble boost. Again, this whole bit up here is just kind of pushed forward in front of everything, and that is probably fine for gaming. It's probably fine for some electronic music, but yeah, it's a little bit harder to listen to if you're just listening to it for casual music. And they should have just called it a gaming set and kind of been clear about what they were really going for on the intention of the tuning. So, and kind of comes down to this as well, right? This is a 1+6, this is a 1+6. Is there any benefit to that? Is it better than a dynamic driver for gaming? And I'll say that when you look at the area that they boosted, I'll say not that a DD can't really do this, and it could do that quite fine. Their dynamic drivers can probably do it that fine. But perhaps in this case, the way they pushed it and kind of the clarity that they were going for in the upper range, and how much kind of the level they wanted to hit and the sound they wanted to hit is probably better handled with balanced armatures than it was going to be for dynamic drivers in this particular case. But generally, I would say there's probably not that much of a benefit. There is kind of this note definition. There's kind of a clarity to balanced armatures when they are done. When you pair them with a faster dynamic driver, there's a benefit to that style for a hybrid over a single dynamic driver. But in this case, I think they just pushed this really hard, and that would have been a little bit harder to do on a single dynamic driver. And again, on the treble, it's just pushed quite hard and level, but so was the original, right? This one was a bright set as well. It's kind of no different in the Pro 2. It does sound nicely resolved. And again, this is mostly going to be tuned for gamers with a ton of upper extension. When you listen to it, it has a very, very airy, very wide sounding sound to it. And that's because of this area is pushed quite hard. And, that works for certain things like gaming. For music, it's going to sound a little bit weird. It's going to sound kind of overly done. That's kind of exactly what you got on the original. No, not that much different on the 2. So the stage and the imaging, yes, you push this much upper range and it will create a kind of this immersive cinema mode. Like if you've ever clicked one of those buttons on your phone that said, hey, this is now, we're going to listen to movies in the cinema mode, and everything kind of expands around your head. That's kind of the effect that you get by pushing so much energy into this range. It kind of gives you this more of a cinema mode, and it can sound very wide and very tall. And that's all fine if that's what you're into. For those of you who might want to EQ it, I would say just put a high shelf in about 4,000, and you can actually see what I did here in EQ. So the red is the original graph. The green is if with a high shelf at about 4,000. So somewhere around here, it just kind of tilts. It basically tilts the whole graph down like that. So that you see the green line kind of brings everything down. And again, for those of you who are kind of curious about graphs in general, and you want to know if a set is generally bright or not generally bright, I tend to look at the 10K level. So when you look at the 10K level, where the frequency response crosses the 10K line, you can kind of see it's over the bottom line, which is this at the bottom of the mids. You kind of cut across, straight across. That typically hits the 10K line at the same point. If you see like where that arrow is on the right side, if you see that point is a little bit elevated, that is probably a pretty good proxy that says everything from about 10K over is going to be a little bit elevated, a little bit brighter. That's exactly what happens on Pro 2. So if you tilt the whole upper range down, so the green basically crosses the 10K at the bottom of the mids at about that flat line at 60 dB on this particular graph, that kind of makes it sound like lots of other KZ sets and a little bit more in line with what I would like for casual music listening. But for gaming, I think this is kind of fine. You kind of bump that and it creates a cool, wide kind of sound stage that people will appreciate for gaming. So as I said, they should probably just have written this off as a gaming set and marketed that way as opposed to more of their musical hybrid. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.